afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining for another edition of Kidney Talks with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, MOTEP, the Minority Tissue and Transplant Education Program, the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, and BlackDoctor.org. I'm your host for today, Suna Halley, and I'm a program manager at the GW Liver and Pancreas Institute for Quality. Our panelists for today are none other than Dr. Clive Callender, professor of surgery at Howard University College of Medicine and founder of MOTEP, and Dr. Keith Melanson, chief of the GW Transplant Institute and professor of surgery at the George Washington University. August is National Minority Donor Awareness Month, which stemmed from National Minority Donor Awareness Week in 1996, founded by our very own Dr. Callender's MOTEP. Out of 100,000 individuals who are currently listed for transplantation nationally, 60% of those individuals are represented by racial and ethnic minorities. So today, our webinar is titled The Truth About Organ Donation and Transplantation. We'll be hearing stories of transplantation and donation from patients themselves. To start the talk, we'll go to Tracy Chavez. Tracy, please introduce yourself and tell us about your story about transplantation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy Chavez. I am a transplant recipient. I received a living kidney from a living donor September 8th, 2020. I'm coming up on my third year post-transplant anniversary, and I'm really excited about that. I was on dialysis for a year in 2019. I think when I look back and reflect, I don't want to always blame COVID, but I feel like COVID mixed up the years. And every time someone asks me when I had my transplant, I have to really think about that. So I was on I was on dialysis for 1 full year. And my donor happened to be a family friend who found out that I was going into kidney failure. I had to get I chose to do PD dialysis at home. So every day I was dialyzing for 9 hours overnight, and I was working full time as an elementary school teacher at that time as well. And during the time frame when I had to start dialysis and have the surgery to have the tubes put in, my donor, James Shelby, came over to see about me because he didn't really understand what I was talking about or what was going on. So as he was sitting there looking at me recuperate outside on my deck under an umbrella, he said, explain to me what dialysis is. What do you mean? How did you go into kidney failure? What are your numbers? All this kind of stuff, because I kind of sort of talked to him a little bit about it. So he just became really curious and inquisitive, came over to visit, and he said, what does somebody like me do to see if I can help save your life? So we ended up having a conversation. We went through the whole conversation about, what was required. I introduced him to the long and lengthy list of tests that had to be done, and he decided to go forward with that. But he never told me when he was going to start. He just asked questions and just kind of disappeared for a while. And when I reached out to him a couple of times, he didn't answer. So I really did not talk to him very much through that whole process. And then it came up that he could be a donor for me. We were not an exact match. I think a lot of people listen to that terminology like you found a match. James was actually a different blood type than me. I'm AB, A positive. And Dr. Melanson performed an ABO incompatible transplant. And so I had to do several things prior to the transplant and after, so that I would not reject James's kidney. And so far, it's been a blessing of a success. And during the process, though, before James said that he could actually donate a kidney to me, I did speak to some people in my community who had transplants, and someone just kind of tapped me and said, "Hey, have you written a letter?" And I asked, "What did you mean by that?" And they said, "Have you written a letter to send to family or friends that might be interested in sort of requesting and finding out if they would be willing to donate a kidney to you. And I was like, what do you say? Like, hi, my name is Tracy Chavis and my kidneys are failing and will you give me one of your organs? Like, I didn't know what to do. So this friend told me what to kind of say. I wrote like a rough draft and shared it with him. He said, this is perfect. And when I went to visit GW Transplant, I asked if there were like pamphlets or something. I mean, my background is education and working with, kids from 5 years old all the way up to teenagers. And I'm always working with parents and we always have paper. So I was like, can I have something to like give people other than this letter? So I wrote a letter, typed it out, got some pamphlets from GW that sort of explained what to do, had all the contact information on it, who to contact, and put them in these nice little envelopes. And one of the things that I put at the end of the letter, other than explaining that I was going into kidney failure and this was my blood type and I was looking for an organ, was you do not have to tell me that you're interested in doing this or not. Just the mere fact that you asked. I gave this packet to anybody that asked about it. And one of the things I said in the letter, just for the mere fact that you're even considering it, the fact that you would take the time to read this is enough of a gift thus far. And I just tried to make it, I was just really humble about it and just said, you do not owe me a response, a follow-up call or a letter or anything. And I got such a response. I was really kind of blown away. A couple of parents of some former students, a girlfriend of mine, a former long-term substitute of mine who was older than me offered, my kids. I had a student that passed away a few years ago. Her mother offered me one of her organs, her best friend. It was amazing. So, but I wrote the letter and I think it was sort of like the biggest thing that I learned about trying to ask somebody to potentially be a donor is to just feel the fear and do it anyway. Like just take your ego out of it. Just do it. It's because it's a matter of life and death. And I think I was sort of playing it low. Like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. But then when I was told, Dr. Milan, I was like, yeah, well, you're at pretty much 4% kidney function. It kind of like really made me realize that I'm asking somebody to really help save my life. And had a successful transplant and a few bumps along the way, but was able to overcome those things. And here I am almost 3 years post-transplant.
Wow.
That's an amazing story, Tracy. Thank you so much for sharing. You are inspiring so many, and I'm just so glad we were able to bring you to this platform. What an amazing story. We'll move on to our next patient, and then we'll open up for questions. And if anyone is watching and has any questions about Tracy's story, please feel free to add it in the chat, and we'll make sure to address it. Next, I want to go on to John. John, if you don't mind sharing your story about your road to transplantation.
Okay, sounds good. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Okay, great. My name is John Reynolds, and I am a recent kidney recipient. My surgery was June 27th, about 6 weeks ago, and I was hospitalized until July the 6th. And my birthday was July 7th, so I had a birthday gift coming home, pretty much. I was diagnosed with kidney renal insufficiency 20 years ago, and the doctors had said their goal was to keep me off of dialysis for 10 years, which would have been 10 years ago. And somehow, through the advocacy and through clearly what I call to be a power greater than me, my kidneys didn't fail until about 4 months short of 20 years. And I applaud the other young lady who was speaking before me, who said she was at work on peritoneal dialysis. I was on peritoneal too, and I was not at work. I was at a high school, and it was not happening. So I had to wimp out when I was on dialysis. And I was only on it for 5 months, but that 5 months was a reality check. I too was at super low function, and it was brought on by COVID. I went from 12%, which was not a lot in itself, to about 5 in about a 2-week period.
Oh, wow.
So I sort of had a kidney crash, so to speak. But I knew I was on the track to needing a transplant anyway. I say all that though to say that the students and some coworkers were asking me why I was wearing these oversized slides to work and no shoes anymore. because my feet were and ankles were swollen and I couldn't get a shoe on anymore. So at some point, this led to a conversation with Jesus, who became my donor, and I told him pretty much everything that I've told you. And then he said, "Well, how long do you have to be on dialysis?" And I said, "Until I get a kidney." And then he said, "Who do I call?" And I was like, "That's kind of like a heavy lift, you know. You might need your kidney later in life yourself." But I understood that GW would have a thorough screening with him, you know, physically and psychologically. So I went ahead and referred him to it, and he had a desire to donate a kidney when the semester was over. School was out on a Friday, and we rolled in surgery on Tuesday. And to say that I'm just blown away is, I don't have any words for it, actually. I just don't have any words for the whole process. But prior to that, I like to say that I was actually getting prepared for this, even though the actual turnaround time was pretty quick. I think that living with kidney disease for 20 years, I counted that as my preparation time. You know, to me, it wasn't an overnight remedy, you know, to say the least. And I had a lot of advocacy in Detroit and here at Howard. I forgot, Dr. Callender. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, he's from the support group that I have been sporadically attending, but it's not totally because I'm not available. But I'll get to that in a minute. But he's at Howard, and my nephrologist is at Howard, Dr. Murray, who was, you know, more of an advocate for not just for me, but for kidney health in particular. I mean, she sponsored kidney fairs and just things that would bring the knowledge of kidney disease and the need to have kidney care and kidney advocacy to the general public. And that's the one thing that I would like to sort of bridge myself, because I'm not surprised that Ms. Tracy said that she didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it until I lived with it for 20 years. Jesus didn't know anything about it, and he was a donor. And I think that gap is that if you're not affected by it directly, then you don't really have a frame of reference to even seek knowledge in that area. And I think that, or actually I feel at this point obliged to really sort of advocate for a greater awareness of kidney donors and just how to maintain or manage kidney health, or, you know, kidney failure in the Black community and the Black and Brown community in particular, because it's well known that, you know, we have to fight for healthcare that's generally bestowed upon others. But again, we have also shown since we've been here that we are not averse to fighting. So I'm just glad to be a part of this. And really, I feel that I feel like a duty. This is my first foray into speaking, and I would like to get involved with speaking to an audience that where hopefully I can facilitate increasing kidney donors, because saying that I'm a direct donor a direct beneficiary is it's just amazing. And I don't have words for it, which says a lot, because I write books. And if I don't have words for it and I write books, this is something that really is nothing to sneeze at. So I'll end it there. I don't want to hold up the panel. But thanks for having me.
Oh, this is awesome, and I'm so glad that this is your inaugural presentation. You're going to be reaching so many individuals. So thank you so much for being a part of this important panel, John. We're going to go on.
Thank you.
Jesus, as well, as many of you heard, Jesus actually donated his kidney to John, and we're going to hear from the perspective of a donation patient. So, Jesus, please share with us your road to donation.
Hi. I'll keep mine brief. So I'm Jesus, and I worked with John last school year. And I don't mean to sound preachy, but it's hard to talk about this without the spiritual component of it. I was really active in my church, and I was trying to act a life of the scripture. It's more blessed to give than to receive. So when I saw John in the hallway and asked him questions, I was like, this is it. This is my opportunity. So I just told him, have your people call me. And they see what we can do. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how we went about it.
Wow.
Wow.
Simple. But thank you so much for sharing your story, Jesus. Not only words, but also just you being physically here and for folks to see that is a possibility. It's speaking volumes. So we're going to open the panel to our incredible physicians and surgeons here. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask, or any information you would like to share about our patients, and then we can open it up to audience questions.
I'm Dr. Clive Callender, and I'm just thrilled beyond belief. What you've shared is just, as John Reynolds said, it takes your breath away to hear the love that resulted in such wonderful change in life. You know, the miracle of transplantation. You know, I'm a transplant surgeon, but just to hear those stories is just miraculous. And to see that what has happened, is better to give than to receive. That's what he said. You know, he doesn't speak much, but his actions speak so much louder than his words. And
They do.
the fact that Dr. Melanson would do both transplants, and Tracy had a transplant that years ago people would have said that it was impossible.
Exactly.
Transplant, and because the shortage of donors is the number one problem in transplantation today, the miracle that we've heard from Jesus and John and Tracy is just wonderful. You know, as the founder of National Minority Donor Awareness Month, you have no idea how much joy it brings to my heart.
Feels good.
Yeah, you know, thank you, Dr. Callender, and I would echo your sentiments. You know, it's interesting because I normally, whenever I talk about the donors and the recipients, I start with the donors. But today, you know, I want to start with the recipients because, you know, what's so obvious when Tracy and John are talking, and if you know them like I know them, then you know that these are special people. You know, I tell people all the time, you might have some friends or family, but how many people you know would give you a kidney? Right? Because, you know, you got to think about that. You might have associates that, you know, that this is not like getting a loan for like, I got friends that it would be hard to get $50 out of them. So to get a kidney is a huge sacrifice, right?
Right.
And when you listen to this story, first of all, we have 3 educators here, 3 people that work in the schools in this area. So that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. But listen to the story of Jesus and John. John knows a lot of people. There are lots of people that could have stepped up and saved his life, but a coworker that he didn't know for that long winds up being his. And you know, it's kind of funny that Jesus' name is Jesus because, you know, pronounced a different way, it would be Jesus. But this man by the name of Jesus, who he barely knows, winds up saving his life. You know, same thing with Tracy, right? That wasn't a family member. This wasn't somebody she grew up with in the hood. Not that she grew up in the hood. I'm just saying, you know, in the neighborhood. I'm just saying, you know, James, and I'm so sorry James is not here because he's a big character as well. But James, another biblical name, James stood up and saved her life, right? So what's so beautiful about transplant is that you get stories like this, and that so many of these people are Black and brown, because Dr. Callender knows this very well, we suffer from these problems inordinately, right? We have 4 times the kidney disease of white people. And people say all the time, I talk to transplant people all over the country, and they're like, oh, we can't get black people to donate. You know, we just don't get the minority community to donate. And look at what we're looking at today. In other words, you can do it, but you've got to engage with you got to have a relationship with the people that are going to do it. But it all starts with, I'm going to use a very important word here. It starts with love. And that's what's so beautiful about what you see here, right? You know, this is love, loving someone beyond yourself, because love is not selfish, right? What Jesus did is the ultimate gift. It's altruistic. He's going beyond himself. He wasn't thinking about himself. You know, there's a reason why this man went and lived in Madagascar for 2 years, right? I mean, he did that because he is a selfless individual. James, what he did for Tracy, that was a selfless
and no questions asked. That's
no
the thing.
questions
He just
asked,
wanted to know,
right?
what do I need to do?
Exactly. And I always say, when I talk about transplantation, I was like, you know, the world today, there's so many things that's depressing, from the increase in violence to the political wars that we're having in this country right now. But what always just lights my soul on fire is you guys, right? Because I realize that we still have a beautiful world. And this is just a lovely example of that. And once again, the important message is there are black and brown people that have that kind of love and want to save their friends and family. And we need more of this. I get to see it every day, but we need even more because we have more of a problem than everyone else.
Right. Like more of a conversation, because the more you talk about it, the more you realize how many people within your circle or your friend circles, somebody is going through kidney disease or could learn more about how to either like stave it off or, you know, depending on the situation. Because like, I apologize, like John so eloquently shared that he had a particular condition. I had kidney disease my whole life. Mine was hereditary, and I knew something was going on. And we had access to doctors, you know, when we were younger, and we lived in New York and Queens. And I mean, for how long was my pediatrician telling my mom that Tracy's spilling protein in her urine? But at that time, you know, in the 70s, like that's where it stopped. It wasn't really being discussed. My pediatrician didn't say, well, I want you to take Tracy to a specialist. My mom didn't really ask any really particular questions. And it really didn't become way more apparent until like the end of high school and when I started college. And then I could tell some things were going into my body, but I attributed it to just, you know, maturing. And then after that, it wasn't really like on the radar until I had my sons in 2000. I had a multiple birth. I had twins. And so it was at that time that it became more alarming. And then after I delivered them, it became more and more alarming because my numbers weren't balancing. Well, because of that kidney condition, I developed preeclampsia. No one else in my immediate family when they were pregnant had preeclampsia, but it's like, you know, I just kept asking questions. And then I saw a nephrologist regularly after the delivery of my sons. And then all I got for all those years, even with good insurance and all of that and access, was, well, we'll just wait and see. And it just kept getting worse and worse, my numbers. And then, you know, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, like John said, you started swelling and having other issues and symptoms. And I tried everything. I changed. I became vegan and vegetarian and this and this and this. And I saw other specialists and I tried to get a genetics test and I was denied. And after a point, I was like, you know what? I'm done chasing my tail and taking blood every week and just having the same thing said to me. And I got a third opinion. And GW, it's interesting, I saw another doctor that a friend had seen, and he said, I'm going to tell you something that you probably already know, that you're going into kidney failure and you definitely need dialysis. What I'm about to tell you is that these numbers, you should have started what I'm about to ask you to do 2 years ago. And then this particular nephrologist happened to be a nephrologist of color, and he was much farther away. It was it was in Towson. So long story short, he gave me a list of other transplant centers. GW wasn't on that list because that was more towards Baltimore County. So anyhow, again, GW wasn't on the list. I started calling the other places, and then I had a friend who was talking to my husband and said, "Oh yeah, you ought to go to GW because I've worked with another doctor on that team and they're really great and this and this and this." I had no idea. I said, "Okay, great. What's the number?" I called, and there was like just a little bit of, red tape to get through, so small and minor. It was just a totally different, completely different experience. And bam, I had an appointment. I had this, I had that. I got more information and more access to things that had been asking about for years in that, I guess, what would we call it, Dr. Milan's son? It wasn't a meet and greet, but interview. I was interviewed with my family. Like my husband and my sons were in the exam room with me and Dr. Milan's son, and they went through the whole, medical history and everything. I was able to get a genetics test. After my transplant, I found out that both my parents were carriers for the APOL1 gene. Boom! I'm 52 years old at the time, and I'm like, how come I didn't know this? And then I interviewed my family. I mean, I was mad for a really long time, and I decided I had to let that go if I was going to heal. I had to let that go. But I was so furious. It is so important for us to talk to people and to get the message out. It is. When people say to me, well, what test did you take or whatever? I'm like, look, here's my number. Call me anytime. I have given my number to complete strangers.
Yeah.
I have learned about people that are going through transplant. I'm like, what's your address? I'm making you a dinner and I'm sending it over. Like my husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I met this woman that's having a transplant. She needs a meal. Things like that. Like nobody should be left alone in this. And the whole process really taught me that, yeah, this is a complete and utter blessing. It leaves you speechless. But now we have this responsibility to pay it forward over and over and over again, even if it's like talking on things like this, like all the time.
I have a question for you, Tracy. And the reason why I'm asking this is because we go out to dialysis centers pretty often. And for the individuals who are hesitant about transplantation, they are unsure of the process before they are transplanted. And I just want to ask you and John briefly to speak about how important that was and how vital that information was to you post-transplant. Did everything we say prior to transplantation, did you really find it important? Were you able to take that information and share with your family? And did that ultimately help make your decision to be transplanted?
To get the transplant?
Yes.
I never would. I did not. Listen, dialysis is a risk.
Yeah.
Transplant is a risk.
Yeah.
No holds barred. At the end of the day, a dialysis is really going to take you so far. It's really hard on your body. That's a grind. That's really hard. Emotionally, physically, it's hard on the caretakers in your family. It's hard on your job. So if you have a job and you don't have leave, it's hard if you don't have transportation. I mean, it's just hard, period. Transplant isn't easy by any means, but it definitely can prolong your life to the point where the quality of your life is so much more improved. The quality of life that I had during dialysis was just challenging. Again, I worked full time, but I taught second grade. Okay, 7 and 8 years old, 21, 7 and 8 year olds going to work, showing up all the time. If I got sick on my stomach, if I was nauseous, if I was swollen, if it were me, if I had it to do it over again, I wish that I could have gotten to the point of transplant and didn't even have to go through dialysis. I don't wish dialysis on anyone. It can be done. You have a solid team, build personal relationships with them, tell your family, educate them, talk to them about what you can and can't eat or drink and all of the stuff. And really you need partners. You need solid road dogs for all of this. But yeah, dialysis, if you have to have dialysis and you are very adamant about trying to live a full life as long as you can, I would say do everything you can to stay as well as you can during dialysis and get on that transplant list by any means necessary, for sure.
I'm going to ask a question to you, Jesus, and change this just a little bit. We're hearing so much about the transplantation and the road to and after. What was it like post donation for you? Can you explain that process a little bit for our viewers?
Yeah, post surgery, it was a lot of just doing nothing, watching TV and trying to be still. I was going from a pretty active schedule, gym 3 or 4 times a week, playing sports, to just being still. That was the toughest part. And I got out of the hospital after like 3 days. And the pain just started going away pretty quickly. I wasn't on much medication. First 2 days were the toughest. The first day I kind of wish I advocated for more pain medication. That's the only thing I wish I would have done for just that first day. Because the nurses could only give you what they were able to give you. But other than that, I felt like myself again after 2 weeks. I was able to laugh again, and go running. I probably shouldn't tell my doctors, but I went running 2 miles.
2 miles.
The week after surgery.
Yeah, that's not that wasn't on the pamphlet.
Right.
2 miles, slow and
You
steady.
give me
Okay, man, love you.
3 weeks. That's what I heard.
What?
Exactly.
That's a great
Oh,
story. And the reason why I share this because we have a lot of questions. In the past we've done webinars before, and they've asked, well, what is it like to donate? How long will I be out of work? Will I be in pain? And you can see here, everyone, he went to work within a month, you say, or how long was it?
Sorry?
How long was it before you went back to work?
I didn't go to work. I did it in the summer. I could have gone back to work after about a week.
Okay, after about a week.
The recommendation is 2 weeks, I think. But I was walking. I was able to, do the things after about a week. But I didn't know. That's why I waited till the summer.
Okay, perfect. Dr. Malonzo, I'm going to throw this back to you and ask you on behalf of somebody who wants to donate, since it is National Minority Donor Awareness Month. If someone wants to donate, what's the first step that they should do to consider donation? And then what do we do to ensure that they're a perfect match for the recipient?
Yeah, no, thanks, Suna. A great question. And first of all, as I always say, this is a big deal. I mean, although we want donors, we want people to donate, it is still major surgery. And so you definitely should have it in your mind that you are ready to go through a major operation. Even though we do it laparoscopically, even robotically sometimes, it's still major surgery, and bad things can happen even when you go to the dentist, let alone having major surgery. However, of major operations, it is the safest big operation done in this country. And the reason is all the stuff we do up front. So we make sure that no matter what your age is, that you are really in very, very good physiologic condition. Okay, so the types of people that can be donors obviously will not have kidney disease. So the first thing we do is we do a series of blood tests and urine tests to make sure that their kidney function is normal. We do a very complete history to make sure they do not have anything in their history that would preclude them from being a donor. So, cancer, like recent cancer or active infection, any sort of kidney problem, psychological, not all, because, the most common medicine prescribed in the United States today is, antidepressant / anxiety medicine. So, I'm talking about major psychiatric problems. So any major psychiatric problems, any any major cancer, infection, or decreased kidney function for any reason. These are the sorts of people. Oh, diabetics, that's the other one. And if you're a diabetic, not pre-diabetic, but actual diabetic, these are the sort of things that immediately would rule people out. If that's not the case, then we put them through a very extensive workup. We frown upon other things. We try to find people who have not had major surgery, but there's some operations that you could have had, particularly like cesarean section or hysterectomy, pelvic surgery, which is okay. But the reason why it's so safe is because of this extensive workup. And sometimes, particularly on the recipient side, people wonder why it takes so long for a donor to be cleared. It's because we make them jump through a lot of hoops, not just the testing in order to be cleared physiologically, but also the emotional, social, and because we want to make sure that these people really want to do this, and that they're not doing it for some sort of secondary gain. And by secondary gain, I don't mean, getting a check from the recipient. What I mean is, having some sort of psychological issue that they're trying to make up for. Somebody might have done something in their life that makes them feel like, okay, if I'm going to make amends by being a donor. You just want to make sure people are doing it for the right reasons. So you want them going in with good psychological, emotional, and physiologic health. And like I said, the people that make it through the rigors of that, and it's nationwide, it's only about a quarter of the people that come forward. So I tell people, you want to have many bites at the apple, because you need about 4 donors for one to pass. Right now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but the point is, it takes a lot for someone to be cleared to be a donor, and that's why these patients, like Jesus, do so very well after the operation, because the clearance is very, very rigorous.
Very good information. Very, very good information, Dr. Callender. Anything to add to the pre-transplant?
Yeah, I think that what is clear is that there are many reasons why people don't donate, but the most important thing is that they don't recognize that you have to be healthy to be acceptable to be a donor. But if you want to be a donor, then this is possible. Also, we don't talk too much about the fact that you don't have to be a perfect match. For bone marrow transplantation, you need to be a perfect match. But for kidney transplantation, you don't have to be a perfect match. And of course, what Tracy and Dr. Melanson have shown us, you don't even have to be the same blood type or compatible blood type. So that it is now possible, especially here at George Washington, to get a transplant when people say you're not acceptable as a donor. Tracy mentioned the fact that there's a special genotype that some people use to exclude people from getting transplanted, but actually that should not be the case. And one of the things about being transplanted at George Washington is that it's a place where you get transplanted where people would otherwise say, no, you're not a candidate. But lo and behold, you have examples here of 2 people who might not have been transplanted elsewhere, but they were transplanted successfully here. And I think this is, it's appropriate to give a plug to what the great work that Dr. Melanson has done at George Washington University Transplant Institute. And the fact that you got a transplant team where people of color predominate. And so I think this is something that we tend not to talk about, that I thought I should put on the table. And the other thing is that Tracy also, and actually John Reynolds also pointed out the fact that, we do this screening every week. And it's because what she mentioned was that if you have protein in the urine, then that's a sign that you have kidney disease, the earliest sign of kidney disease. That, along with high blood pressure and diabetes, are the things that are important. So finding out that you have protein in the urine means that you have kidney disease and that you need to be seen by a nephrologist. And as soon as possible, you need to be worked up and delay the onset of kidney disease as long as possible.
Right.
But still, that's a sign that no doctor should ignore. And when it occurs, being seen by a nephrologist and ultimately getting a transplant is something that can be life-saving.
Yeah, I just want to build on something Dr. Callender said, because I think he made a great point. And it really was brought home by the fact, I was talking to Dr. Johnson in my office yesterday, and we were both astounded by, we were looking at the data for life expectancy in this country. And Black men have the shortest life expectancy. And it's only 69 years. And, average life expectancy for everybody else is over 70, with white women having the longest life expectancies. And yet, with us having these incredibly shortened lives, it's not really a focus, right? And so, one of the things that I always am astounded at is that, in this country, we don't put the same focus on things that kill Black and brown people as we do on things that kill others, right? So here we have a epidemic of kidney disease, and yet we don't have enough donors to save the lives of Black people. Yet it's so easy for our institutions, I'm talking about in transplant, to put more strictures on minorities getting transplant. We don't have nearly enough live donors, but like Tracy was saying, there are people that, and Dr. Callender mentioned this, there are people that because of some genetic testing that we have not yet to actually prove causes kidney disease in all the patients that have the genes. Yet we will stop them from being donors. Same thing with high blood pressure, same thing. There's a lot of different reasons why people will come up with excuses for not doing transplant in Black and brown people. Yet we do a lot of other things in this country that is a lot more risky than for people to be donors. So my point is that it all starts with this concept of we want to help this community, right? Dr. Callender spent his entire life, making sure that we got more donors on the deceased donor side, and has been very, very successful. And now we're finally getting more donors on the live donor side. But the point is, it all starts with the concept that these lives are worth saving. So what Tracy had is an operation that is not done many places. But we feel that it's imperative that you try to do everything possible, because Tracy's life is worth saving, right? It's not like a eureka moment. I mean, she is a beautiful person that deserves to live, as is John, as is a lot of other Black and brown people. Look, I'm a humanist. I want everybody to do well, but there's no reason why one particular community should not have every single opportunity, right? So I just think that it's up to us to sometimes put that target where it needs to be, to put that emphasis where it needs to be, because for whatever reason, and usually it's just, it's not top of mind to many others, but it needs to be top of mind to us, that if we don't take the tiger by the tail, no one else will. And so I'm so happy and proud to see Tracy doing so well, knowing that she got something that a lot of people would not have gotten. Let me tell you, Jesus is a very straightforward transplant for us, but there are lots of places that would have had a problem with his story being able to come forward. I mean, it's so mind-boggling to me that people think of obstacles for donors, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We try to think of solutions, but I guarantee you, and again, this happens more with Black and brown donors than anything else. But I've had people come forward to me, and I almost laugh at when I hear what the problem was at the other institution, right? And this is not just with Black and brown donors, but more so with that population, right? There's a woman in the chat that just said, I just read it. I don't know if you saw it, but she said that she wants to donate to her father, and she's on 1 blood pressure medicine. It sounds like. I mean,
Yeah.
Again, not a problem at all. She needs to call us. I mean, that's crazy. So yeah.
And here's the thing about that
Felicia,
too.
you can be a donor. Call us.
But you can even have a low grade blood pressure, variable numbers or whatever. And by the transplant, approaching the whole concept of transplant like a team, right? You have a social worker, you have a nutritionist, and all of that. You could have somebody on the transplant team could work with that potential donor for her father and work at some ways on her diet and other things to get her blood pressure down and get her off the med and be a perfect candidate.
Absolutely. And to your point, Tracy, we have seen this so often. Dr. Callender knows this, but we are pretty much number 1 in the country as percentage of our donors, live donors that are African American, and are minority. And the issue is exactly what you just said. So a person will come in and their blood pressure is high and they have protein in their urine, and then their weight is higher. So you tell them, okay, all right, look, you have a couple of issues here. Let's change your diet. Let's get you to lose some weight, and then let's retest you. And I cannot tell you how many people have lost 20, 25 pounds. Their blood pressure normalizes, and the protein in their urine goes away. All right. So now you took someone that was in a pretty unhealthy state, trying to help someone. You made them healthier, and then you can clear them to be a donor. Right. It's not rocket science, but what does it start with? It starts with this concept that you want to help that community. And in order to do that, you need to be willing to go above and beyond. I know people that have been turned down to be donors where all they had was a conversation with the transplant center. And they had something that the transplant center said, oh, no, sorry, your APOL1 is positive. You can't be a donor here. Without knowing anything else about their history, without knowing anything else about their physiology. And I just think that's the wrong way to look at this, because at the end of the day, like you said, Tracy, this is a gift of life. This is not just getting off dialysis. We're talking about, elongating people's lives by decades sometimes. Right. So why wouldn't we bend over backwards?
Right.
I would make a final comment from my perspective. The beauty of it is that I'm not a George Washington person. I'm from Howard University. But one of the things that you guys find difficult to say, but I don't, is that for people of color, they need to really come to George Washington University, because what happens here doesn't happen anywhere else. And for that reason, you Black and brown people need to take advantage of the expertise that is here. It's unique, special. They care, and take advantage of it. That's my last comment.
Thank you.
Oh, can I jump? As a patient, I would like to concur. I found him to be exceedingly thorough and very attentive to detail, and things that I would overlook, they were not willing to let slide. I had a case of AFib one night, and I looked up, there were 7 doctors, and I was like, I was asleep, okay? And I do not want to wake up. And they kept me up all night for this AFib. I was not happy. You would have thought, I was okay. You would have thought I was in good shape, and I was. I mean, I'm laying here with a new kidney, complaining about, being waking up in the middle of the night. So it does make a difference. And again, when I speak about that advocacy, it really, it matters. It does matter, and it does. A lot of what Tracy had to go through, I avoided because I had doctors of color. Dr. Callender would know, but he knows Murray, I'm sure. And, Dr. Murray, if I sat there at her office sometimes and I was not paying attention, she would write me a note and say, read that when you get home, okay? She was very, attentive, very aggressive, but, in a positive manner.
Right.
And when I think I was too slow about getting myself on the transplant list. And she sat there one day when I was in the office and called GW and Georgetown to make sure I was on the transplant list, back in 2019. So she's extremely, again, that's that advocacy that you get from physicians of color that we really don't get elsewhere.
You don't.
And to
You
me, see,
don't.
I look at that as the potential lack of that because of this, right-wing attack on affirmative action, could have devastating consequences down the road. So, I would just, hope that, Meharry, Howard, there's another one out west, I think, and Fisk. Yeah, and Fisk, they really,
right.
keep, pushing out these black doctors that are being excluded from other places. And then what Dr. Melanson said, when, again, I think what advocacy in the general realm from patients like me would make a difference is that, I didn't know that people were being turned down. And, I would imagine that if I went to a place and I wanted to be a donor and I was turned down, it would not occur to me to call someone else, and that's something that I think would be profitable for the public to know, that if someone says no, then, you might want to look into it a little bit further and not just take what
don't
they
give
say
up.
at face value. Yeah. And then the last thing, Melanson was talking about Jesus being in good shape. That's what they marveled at me being in pretty decent shape when I came in there too. Yeah. And I was just fortunate. I was with some soccer players who were like literally half my age, and they ran me in the ground. I was at the back of the line, the soccer line, but it put me at the front of the line for people in my age group, because I really was trying to keep up with these guys, and it made a difference. And this whole transplantation thing is just really give you a greater gratitude, because I had a friend who flat out told me, who knew I had kidney damage. She said, I wouldn't have given you a kidney, but she told me I wouldn't have given you a kidney. But wait a minute, she pushed me to go to UDC to get a teaching degree because I was subbing. And she said, you're giving away money, you're giving away benefits, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to hear it, but I listened at some point after about, I don't know, 10 months or whatever. And I ended up going to UDC, and I told her, I said, it wasn't for you to give, but what you did have, you gave, and that was for me to have some stability that I was able to employ with being a patient that I certainly would not have had as a substitute.
Are you all still friends?
Oh, she gave me. I got my. I have a contract. I have a contract that I did not have because of her. So yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good.
Your message.
We're good.
Your message resonates with so many, John. That don't give up hope. And I think with what you guys have shared and our amazing surgeons is that find options, do your research, go out there, be proactive about your health. But there are resources and there are options for you, whether you are looking to receive a transplantation. And this month is not just focused on kidney transplant. We're talking about all types of organ donation. So whether it's a kidney or educating yourself about even deceased donor donation. Are you a donor? Do you know if you're a donor? Make sure that you are, because even in your current life, you can donate, or if you're deceased, you can donate and save someone's life. So we want to say thank you to everyone who has been a part of this panel today. I believe we have one testimony that somebody shared in the comments. We'll go ahead and just put that back on the screen so that our panelists know just how much of an impact you've made in this short time. Evelyn Robinson said that, look at God. Right now, I'm sitting at my granddaughter's room with family. This past Tuesday, my youngest daughter donated one of her kidneys to her. Today, they are both going home. So not only are we talking about it and how people can actually do it, folks are talking about the success of donation, the success of transplantation, and they're living. So thank you all for being a part of this timely and important panel for National Minority Donor Awareness Month. And hopefully you can take this information and share it with your communities. So on behalf of the Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, on behalf of MOTEP, the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, and of course, blackdoctors.org, we want to thank you so much and have an amazing day.
You too. Stay well.